All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ben Dixon here, your host. Very excited about this upcoming MLM Monday. I have a very special guest for you here today that's going to be on the show with us. And before I introduce him, I wanted to let you know that today's topic is for those of you that run Party Plan or you run direct selling or you run MLM organizations. Sometimes on the show we have tips and information for those of you that are promoters of companies. Today's really about the folks who actually run the companies. Maybe you're experiencing as a distributor some of these issues yourself and you want to share this with the corporate team at the company that you present. You're welcome to do that as well. So today we wanted to touch on a really special topic, what we call merchant processing and network marketing today. And so what that means is we want to talk about the topic of what it's like to be able to take money into your company with credit cards today, the things you should know, and how the environment really is. And there's no better way to do that than for me to bring on the person that I trust with our clients here at NaXum to guide them in merchant processing, and that is Ajit Harrison. Ajit is here with Abilene Consultants. Thank you, Ajit, so much for joining me on the call. I'm excited to have you here today. So, all right, how's your audio on your side? Can you hear me all right?
It's great, I can hear you.
You're sounding stellar. So AJ, thank you for taking a few moments to join the call today. Super pumped to have you here. I have a bunch of questions that come in all the time, and I thought we'd just go through those today with having you on the line. So the first one I wanted to throw your way is, AJ, how can I, as a startup company, right, prepare for my direct selling merchant account? Right?
Sure. So that's a great question. It's one I get all the time with startups. They're not very familiar with what banks look at, and that's where we help them. The first thing that we always look at is we always look at the website. The website, not just from the bank point of view, but the bank's also, that's what the customer is going to see first. That has to be in tip-top shape. It has to be created. It has to have a great back end. A bank's going to look at that because they're going to know that that's the first impression a customer is going to have. The bank is going to go over that as well to make sure it's compliant, to make sure return policies are in place, privacy policies. It is also a first impression about how much time and effort has the client themselves as a startup put into their website. So yeah, a website's always a great place to start. And of course, because these are banks and processors looking at it, of course they're always going to want to look at financials. When you're asking for money, whether it's a mortgage loan, any kind of loan, they want to see your history. They want to know, are you going to be able to make that mortgage payment? Are you going to be able to sustain your business? So same way the banks and processors, they look at financials. They're going to want to know, all right, if we extend a merchant account to this startup company, are they going to be able to pay their bill at the end of the month? If the company suddenly expands, they get 1,000 new consultants in, and they need to go out there and buy 20 grand worth of product. Does the company have the ability to do that? So financials, website, those are the top two things that I ask all clients to have in place, as well as, of course, a compensation plan. Make sure that's vetted. Which is pretty typical. Most companies have that. But from the merchant side, it's always financials and website. Those are the top two things that we look at.
So let's take a moment on those. I've had a couple clients ask this before, and you're going to say, when you say financials, how much of that is credit score versus like cash in a checking account?
Sure. Okay, great question. So, and that's another thing clients are always like, well, what do we look at? Credit score is always important. It's not make or break because we're all human. We've all had some hiccups in our life. But they're going to want to make sure they don't want to see anything too bad or too extreme where they see a person who has a horrible credit score and not good at managing money. That's going to make a bank nervous. Typically, as far as financials, they're always going to look at, yes, they're going to want to make sure the company has cash in the bank. A lot of startups don't have a lot of cash in the bank. So that's when they look to the owners or the principals in the company to see, do these people have some cash assets or assets that if the company, for some reason, 6 months from now needs a cash infusion, can these people give them some money? We have clients who even have customers, who have partners who, that's what their partnership in the company is, to show financials, to help the company grow, almost like an investor. So yeah, that is very common. Tax returns, profit and loss statements, we do exchange those with the bank for most startups.
A question we get all the time, AJ, then we'll move off of the finance one, is a lot of startup companies that are brand new party plan or direct selling companies. The initial goal we'll have when we meet with them is, how do we get your business to $1 million a month? $1 million a month is this special benchmark because
Sure.
at $1 million a month, they're traditionally shipping out enough product that they've worked out all their kinks. They're paying out enough commissions to where people who are brand new in the industry can look at them and take them seriously and say, oh, these guys have figured their business out. Right? It's kind of a magical benchmark in our industry in a lot of ways of when you're now your real company and you're going places. Once you hit the $1 million a month mark, is the okay, lots more people can feel comfortable to jump in and really grow your business more. So for someone to be able to process $1 million a month, is there a specific amount of money or a range of saying, hey, yeah, this is the type of what we were looking for from someone who you wanted to get $1 million a month merchant account?
Sure. So it's great you bring that up, because most customers, I say, like, where do you want to be in a year? And that is the magic number. They all say, we want to be at that million a month. You know, hundred thousands of dollars here. We want to be at that million. So to start with, most startups will start with anywhere between 25,000 a month to about 200,000 a month. And as far as time period, it normally takes them about a year. You know, we've had guys who do it sooner or later. And the great thing is, once you're vested in with the bank and you have history with them, when you ramp up to that million, they really don't come back and ask for additional underwriting and documents. Your track record and your history is 9 times out of 10 enough. If you jump from 25,000 to $1 million over a few months, they're going to want to have a conversation about that and say, hey, let's make sure this is responsible growth. But you know, I have clients that do 300,000-400,000, and they're like, what happens when we grow to $1 million? I said, you know what? That's why we establish history with the bank, where they're like, hey, after the first 3 to 6 months, they hand you the keys and they say, hey, just be responsible with what we give you.
Got it. Very cool. Well, flipping it over for everyone who's watching the show, what would be some of the things you'd want to see on a website? You mentioned that, hey, the bank's looking through a website. What are some of the key things you say, yeah, that's something I'm definitely looking for on a website?
Obviously, banks want to make sure there's transparency, whether it's on the product. The product doesn't have any sort of overcommitments or, you know, towing the line, to make sure that they won't get into trouble for making any false commitments, because banks are always looking at liability. They're going to want to look at the product, make sure the product is you know, the hero of the story. A well-designed product, banks always love that, because then they know that, you know, this is something that will sell. As far as a bank from a compliance point of view, they're going to want to make sure return policies, privacy policies, terms and conditions are in place. Those are things that banks always look at. And then as far as, you know, the back end, they're going to want to make sure that the compensation plan is well laid out, that the customers are very aware of what they're getting into, what the customers are going to be charged, whether it's for the product or on a monthly basis. All that is written out very clearly. Those are some of the things that we look at.
Now, that is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's something I end up walking through a lot of clients through with our staff all the time, is to make sure that that's clear and in compliance. And it's important to know you're going to have that stuff to get your merchant account well. So another thing that I think a lot of people ask, so, you know, you're getting a timeline in your mind if you're a brand new direct selling company, is, oh, we can't go without a website to go talk to the banks. That's not going to work. So the question becomes, well, they're planning a launch and they're putting together all their systems and sites and just lots of things to start a new company. How much time should they allot to get the new M1 merchant account? Like, how much time between website and the back end systems done for the bank to look at versus getting an account?
Sure. Well, the easy answer to that question is, when everything is done and completed, it takes us, from my side, about 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, I've done it in as short as 5 days. Sometimes it takes a month. A lot of it depends on how complete the package is. But as a startup, it can take them 2 to 3 months, especially since, you know, the website, a lot of times that's one place where it gets bogged down, because it does involve development work. If you're a new startup and you have, you know, compensation plan and your capital, you're probably looking at about 2 to 3 months before I come into the picture, or I come to the picture somewhere in the middle. But, you know, it takes that 2 to 3 months to have everything put together to present to the bank. So once everything's put together and you're ready to go, it takes us about a couple of weeks.
Got it. Oh, that's super helpful. Thank you for sharing that. You know, one of the topics I think about all the time as we have bigger clients in the space, something I know that you've helped us with before with different clients that have needed this, is the thought of the things you do to keep an account once you have it, right? Chargebacks, returns, those policies are all really important stuff. You know, it's just like real customer service, right? Like any business.
Well, one of the things that we like to do is we like to keep, we try to, for clients, they always like to save money. So as they grow, we make sure that their pricing reflects the volume of their business. You know, as a startup, there's not a lot of wiggle room with pricing. We're still able to get them better pricing than, you know, most traditional or even high risk banks. But, you know, once they hit that, like you said, the magic $1 million mark, or $500,000 mark, we're able to keep in touch with them and save some pricing. As far as fraud and chargebacks, there are tools that we can put in place that not only automate that process, but also, you know, are very robust to like keep to prevent chargebacks from happening or to flag fraud. Again, that's not something smaller clients necessarily coming in contact with right out of the gate. But once you start hitting that $500,000, $1 million mark, I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of, you know, there is fraud. There are, you know, people trying to make a quick buck, trying to game the system. So those are some of the things that we put in place on the back end once the merchant account is set up. Another thing that we do is we also set up redundancy. We try to set up, you know, depending on the volume, we start setting up 2 merchant accounts, 3 merchant accounts, and that is it's just the best practice to do, where you know your customer is going to sleep good at night because banks change policies, fraud happens. You know, there's a lot of X factors going on sometimes, and it always is good for the customer to know, hey, if God forbid something went wrong, that we have another account to switch over to, and they can load the balance between those accounts.
Yeah. You know, and I think there were some really important nuggets I want everyone to hear out of some of the things you just shared there. Of course, you should have multiple accounts as you get bigger. That's huge. But it's that basic customer service, right? Is if you want to protect your merchant account, people always ask, what can I do to protect my merchant account? I say, well, what does it feel like to receive customer service from you, right? Because the people who do a chargeback, if it's not for a fraudulent reason, right, they do it because something about the expectation they had for your product didn't match the reality, right? And that's why it happens. That's why a cancellation happens or a chargeback happens. And that's the part to look at. And I know, AJ, you have a ton of nuggets on that. So what would you share to someone to say, why do chargebacks and cancellations happen? The legitimate ones, not fraud, but yeah.
And yeah, fraud, of course, you know, fraud is always, you know, that, and we have some tools that we can put in place to screen those transactions prior. You know, there's address verification, there's card verification, a lot of tools that we help them set up with their gateway. But also, you know, one of the things I like about some of my more successful customers is they say, if we have a customer call up and they're unhappy, we have a right that we could fight them and not give them their money back, but that's most likely going to turn into negative reputation. It's going to turn into
social media. Yeah.
Social media, you know, that out there. People just do anything. And he's like, you know what? It's more, we may take a little bit of a loss refunding them their money, but in the long run, that helps protect our reputation and our merchant account.
And, you know, I get questions about the gaming stuff all the time for some of the clients we do, like compensation plans for, where we're doing commission engines. We have even tools in there, too, that if something was truly wrong or someone did get a refund, we can claw back commissions for future earnings from members and stuff like that to minimize whatever that true expense was on that order to the company. That's awesome. Well, I just thank you so much, AJ, for your time being on MLM Monday today. It's just a pleasure to have you here. I'm grateful that got a chance to share some of this information on folks. If you have more questions from the session, send us a message on the fan page. We're always here to assist you in growing your company. I want to thank you so much, folks, for attending today. Wishing you all the best. God bless.